The Wizard of Oz is beloved by many, many queer people, and it can teach us a lot about how to be kinder to trans people. Now, before we begin, I want to say I've already made a video about why queer people love The Wizard of Oz. In this video, I'm actually going to be breaking down the film itself and talking about how the themes in there can be applied to be better to trans people. And before you start commenting, yes, I know this film does not talk about trans people specifically. And no, it's not cultural appropriation either, because we're part of the culture too. Not to mention in the books there's literally a trans character. So slow your roll. So I'm sure you've seen this film before, but let's do a bit of a recap. So Dorothy is living on a farm in Kansas with her aunt and uncle, and there are a bunch of hands working on the farm to help out. And I have a feeling we'll be seeing them later in the film. The film really starts off with Judy Garland's character of Dorothy. Her dog, Toto, is threatened to be taken away by Mrs. Gulch, who owns half the county. On a side note, how do you own half the county? Do you own the land there? Because I don't know if that actually gives you jurisdiction over there, but nonetheless. So like any child, Dorothy runs away from home. Now, keep in mind, Dorothy is supposed to be 12 years old, even though she's being performed by 17-year-old Judy Garland. Then Dorothy sings Over the Rainbow, a song in which MGM actually wanted to get rid of, but I'm glad they didn't because it's such a beloved song, and Judy Garland would actually sing it throughout her life whenever she did live performances. Because really, it is also not only an anthem for her life, but for queer people as well, of which Judy Garland was a major ally to us. Now I want to address something here about the rainbow pride flag that I think a lot of people get confused about. People like to say that queer people stole the rainbow pride flag from God. The rainbow is a natural phenomenon that exists in nature, does not belong to any of us. Now, Isaac Newton was actually the first to discover this scientifically through a prism, and you can see this prism on the Dark Side of the Moon album. However, there's a pretty big difference between Isaac Newton and queer people of today. That being Isaac Newton. He was obsessed with numerology and was obsessed with the number 7. That's why there are 7 stripes, Roy G. Biv. But if you in fact look at a light spectrum, there is no stripe of color. When you look at the spectrum of colors, it's actually an infinite number of colors. In reality, the rainbow flag was based off this design. It doesn't, in fact, steal it. Just saying. You gotta get a better argument than that. Now at this point, I'm going to put a little bit of a content warning because I'm going to be talking about the Holocaust. So skip to this timestamp below if you want to skip this section, because I understand if it's a bit heavy for you. This starts off in Germany before World War II. Germany was actually a big center for queer rights. A lot of queer research was being done at the time. And with that, a lot of the early research into gender affirmation treatments, gender affirmation surgery was being done in Germany at the time. But of course, World War II and the Holocaust happened. And you've probably seen this picture of a Nazi book burning. And it's important to put context on this. This was a queer book burning. So when people today are saying that we should get rid of queer books in libraries, I'm looking at you, Ron DeSantis. You're actually sharing the same talking points the Nazis used. And frankly, based on your own practices, it kind of sounds like that's your intent. And when most people talk about the Holocaust, they tend to focus on how Jewish people were treated. But let's talk about how queer people were treated in there. Instead of having to wear a star to identify yourself on your clothing, the gay people who were incriminated had pink triangles. They were not released until 1957, 12 years after the Holocaust had ended. Gay people stayed in prison after the Holocaust ended. And for a long time, the pink triangle was considered to be the pride flag. But then Harvey Milk enlisted the help of Gilbert Baker to change that. Harvey Milk was the first openly gay mayor elected into the United States. And Gilbert Baker even called himself the gay Betsy Ross. By June 28, 1970, there was a pride flag Gilbert Baker had designed. But instead of having 7 stripes like Isaac Newton, there were 8 stripes representing sex, life, healing, sunlight, nature, magic and art, serenity, and spirit. However, fast forward to 1978, availability of materials made this complicated. Pink stripe and the light blue stripe had to be removed, so sex and magic and art are no longer represented in the pride flag, which is why we have the 6-stripe pride flag today. So really, the rainbow flag comes about from taking back our own history. Who wants to be defined by hate symbol. Now, I don't know for sure, but Gilbert Baker probably had some inspiration from The Wizard of Oz when this flag was being designed. After all, queer people love Judy Garland, and Judy Garland loved us. So after she runs away, she meets Professor Marvel, who's this kind-spirited guy. He convinces Dorothy to go back home and not run away. But then a Twister ends up arriving, and Dorothy does everything you're not supposed to do in a Twister. And then she gets transported to the land of Oz, and there are all these munchkins there, which was actually at the time one of the biggest gatherings of little people in history. For many of the actors there who played the munchkins, this was the first time they ever met someone like them, which I think is a really cool fact. And if you found that to be a fun fact as well, make sure to sign up for my Patreon at patreon.com/Sally Pryde Drag. Plans start as low as $3. You can watch an extended version of this video where I go over more facts about the Wizard of Oz. Thank you. But hey, if you can't do that, at least give this video a like and subscribe. It boosts this channel along and I greatly appreciate it. And Dorothy realizes, oh, I just killed someone. But it turns out, don't worry, she was ugly, so therefore she was bad. Sounds like some of the hate comments I get. You should not be learning your lesson from Glenda. Just because she calls herself good doesn't mean she's actually good. Beauty does not determine goodness. And she sings a song called come out, wherever you are. And it tells all the munchkins to come out. Much like how queer people come out. And if you've seen my video, Transphobe or Ally Wizard of Oz Edition, you'll know that I suspect half the munchkins are trans. I mean, just look at the Lollipop Guild and the Lullaby Guild. Don't they just give off trans energy? And then by magic, Dorothy steals the slippers off the dead witch she just killed and goes off on an adventure to go see the wizard to try to get back home to Kansas. Because for some reason, she wants to go back home to Kansas. And then she meets the Scarecrow, who doesn't have a brain. And then later, they have strong feelings for each other, but you'll never see that expressed.
I'll miss you most of all.
And then they go see the Tin Woodsman, and well, he has no heart. But doesn't he know all emotions come from the amygdala and the brain? And then they meet the gay icon himself, the Cowardly Lion. And my god, is the Cowardly Lion great. He's probably the funniest character in the entire film.
What do they got that I ain't got? Courage. You could say that again.
And then they have some issues with poppies, which was not actually asbestos, but there was a whole lot of asbestos out there at the time. And then they go see the wizard, and there are a whole bunch of painted horses. And yes, those horses were actually painted. And then they get all cleaned up, and then they go see the wizard without hassle. Because, you know, in the book, that didn't happen. And they all see the wizard at once. And fun fact, in the book, the wizard actually is gender queer. And then they go on a mission to go kill the Wicked Witch, which they end up doing because she's hydrophobic. And then he tries to deliver Dorothy back to Kansas via balloon because he also was from Kansas, but that didn't go out so well. And Glenda, the good 'cause I say so witch, shows up and tells Dorothy, if you really want to go back to Kansas for some reason, you can click your heels 3 times and you'll get there. Which, hold on. I'm convinced she did this because she wanted that witch killed. I mean, why does Dorothy even want to go back there? So what can this film teach you, cis people, to be better to trans people? How it feels to be trans in and of itself. I relate a lot to Dorothy growing up. She was one of the first people who gave me gender awakening, which is where I watched her and felt like I wanted to be her in a gendered sort of way. Her feeling of not fitting in and feeling there's a place beyond her over the rainbow is an experience a lot of trans people can relate to. I know I definitely did. So what can cis people learn from this film? Create a nurturing environment such that trans people don't want to run away from you.